Hi, Elyse. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for making the time.
Hi, Elena. Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here today.
I'm really excited to chat about the things that you're doing. I think it's going to be super interesting to the audience to hear about it, but I want you to also give us a little bit of a context about, how did you come about doing what you're doing today? Give me a little career snapshot.
Okay, well, it might be a little bit more than a snapshot because my career really formed out of a personal experience that I had back when I was 13 years old. Um, and I was constantly taunted as obese Elyse, and I never knew you could rhyme my name with anything. But it was really interesting because it was good information and feedback that was coming in from the outside, but from an internal standpoint, I never felt good. And I was overweight. I never really looked, the way that I felt like I should or the way other kiddos looked. I was always thin in my arms and my legs, but my stomach seemed to always have like this tire around it. And it was inflammation. And I remember just thinking, why do I feel this way? And why do I look like this? And I don't want to feel this way and I don't want to look like this. And so that really prompted me at 13 years old to go to my mom and say, I don't like the way I look or feel and I want to change. Um, and she has a very holistic background as well. And so we went to the food first, and that's where we started. And luckily, 20 some odd years ago now, there was no dietitian or registered dietitian that would see me for liability reasons for seeing a 13-year-old. So I started seeing a holistic nutritionist. And that was really a gift because at that time, I'm able to look back and see that she was really taking a functional medicine approach, which we'll talk about, as well as a coach approach. So she really, I remember sitting in her office and we sat there for 2 hours. She must have asked me a ton of questions, very open-ended questions, about everything and anything, you can think about. And she helped me to co-create a plan that was individualized and personalized for me. And now looking back and knowing stages of change and understanding what it looks like to be able to make change, I was ready. I was confident, I was internally motivated. These are all like ingredients that you need to actually go ahead and make this change. And so within about 2 months, I went from processed foods to whole real foods, and I lost about 50 pounds without dieting or calorie counting or, being on a restricted food plan by any means. It was, we did go off dairy and corn and some other things that could be inflammatory. And my body just completely, it was like someone put a pin in me. And
Hey, you. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to share it with friends and family who might find it interesting. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well to stay up to date on weekly new videos that are going to be coming out with some awesome guests that I bring on. And if you have any questions, use the comment section to ask me questions, to interact. I look forward to talking to you.
And so I realized I had this aha moment: food is medicine. I have to share this message with the world and get this message out there. But I was 13. Who was going to listen to me? I didn't have any formal education, I was barely in middle or going into high school. And so I really that set me off on my professional path. And I went and did my undergrad degree in nutritional sciences and dietetics and realized there was a really different dogma and paradigm being taught in school. It was very much the calories in, calories out diet paradigm. And I also realized that being a dietitian was very much a very directive approach, eat this, don't eat that. And through my own personal experience, I realized that, just eating, let alone changing other things in your lifestyle, takes time. It takes support. It takes advocacy and encouragement on a daily basis sometimes. And I just realized that was just one slice of the pie. So I set out and did a dual master's in holistic nutrition and clinical health psychology. because I was really curious about why. We have all this information. I mean, we've got more information, I think, than we know what to do with at this point. But yet so many people are still struggling to connect the dots and to get to the root cause of what's going on, and to really make changes in their life that are impactful and are meaningful and purposeful. And so I've always been curious. I've always asked why. I've always wanted to get the root cause. When I was in grad school, another aha came about. I got diagnosed with celiac disease. And no one for months could get to the root of what was happening with me. I probably went and saw 10 different practitioners. And we finally were able to get a diagnosis from a functional medicine doctor. So some of you might have heard of functional medicine. Some of you are like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And functional medicine is really a philosophy. It's really a way of thinking. It's a way of looking at the whole person, and that all of these systems are interconnected. And it's an evidence-based approach. It's a way to really meet someone where they're at, take a client-centered approach. And so I was able to get a diagnosis from this functional medicine doctor. And I remember he gave me this diagnosis, and he gave me 2 pieces of paper, and walked away and was like, okay, time to go make some big changes in your life. And with the schooling and the education and my own personal experiences that I had, I'm like, this is not enough. Like, I mean, I can do this on my own. It's going to take me a heck of a longer time. I wish that I had someone with a similar skill set and knowledge set who could really shorten the time here and help me get better faster. And so that's where I really acknowledged that there was a gap in healthcare between the practitioner and the provider. And I wanted to change that. I didn't know what that was going to look like. But fast forward a few years, I met my business partner, Sandra Scheinbaum, and she and I co-founded the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. So it's an online school. It's international, and it's a virtual school. And we train health coaches in functional medicine and functional nutrition and mind-body techniques and the art and science of coaching. And what's different is that we look at the positive psychology. We look at what's going well with you already, and we look at your strengths. So if someone has a high strength of creativity, or gratitude or honesty, we look at how can we partner with you as a coach and support you using what's already going well, what your strengths are, to help move you forward on the goals that you want to. So that's where we're at to date. We got about nearly 4,000 graduates worldwide. And it's just a very exciting time in healthcare because people need support, a lot of support right now. So many things going on in the world.
Absolutely. And kudos to you to recognizing that at an earlier age and actually setting on route to be like, I really want to impact people. Now you're doing that, not only directly people, but also kind of educating others so they can impact. So it's like multiplying the impact on the world, essentially. So that's really amazing. You've mentioned a lot of great points, and I just want to pick on a couple of those. So one, you were talking about the root cause, and I think that's so essential because a lot of times, we don't get, even in just life situations or work situations and health, like we never get to the root cause, right? So like, it's always like the surface. So, and is it because it's just easier to attack the surface versus getting to the root cause? What have you seen, especially in the health world, I guess?
That's such a good question. I love it. It's so funny because in my experience, the root cause, or that top symptom, if you will, it's never the real issue. It's just it's just what's kind of presenting itself right now, right? And that can change and that can morph into other things. What I've seen when we can get to a root cause is a couple things. And I think this is really where the value of a functional medicine certified and trained health coach comes in, where you can create a safe space with someone and know how to do that, know how to create a trust and a bonding and a rapport with someone, so that, and sometimes that requires the coach or whoever, to open up the vulnerability door, if you will, a little bit, and to share something a little vulnerable, to allow space for someone else to come in and step in and say, oh, okay, they just open up a little bit. I think that's okay. I think I can do that as well.
Mhm.
But it's a process, and it doesn't just happen overnight or in one session. There really is no, just like you can't give a pill for every ill. You can't just make this shift overnight. There's some uncovering and some layers to, it's like uncovering, I'm sure you've heard the onion, and unraveling that and getting to the core, and sometimes stopping for a little bit and pausing and reflecting and seeing, wow, what did I really learn from that? What impacted me there? And um, yeah, so I think a lot of it comes back to being able to create a space so that you can go deeper and get to the core, because a lot of the times what I've seen in practice is that if people try to just rush in there, or I know a lot of people, and I've been there too, from a space of being a director, wanting to just, I know the answer, I know what's wrong with you. I can tell you, I can see it. I can, we really, as coaches, take kind of a back seat in a good way.
Mhm.
And it's really to empower the client to step into their own process and to own their health, to own what's happening. It's so much more powerful, even though it takes longer. And even though like you can see it, it's so much more powerful and impactful to ask the appropriate open-ended questions and to gauge, where you're at with that client. It's this dynamic dance, going back and forth, so that they can make those connections.
Mhm.
That's really where the real impact comes. So it's great that, we can see it, but the client really needs to be able to see it. And then, to be able to ask another open-ended question, like, oh, I wonder what could be done about that. And, kind of just see what answers bubble up to them. I mean, so it's really about trusting that the client has those answers and the magic within them.
Mhm. Yeah, I think vulnerability and just creating that safe space is essential. And, if you think about it, especially now, I mean, in our world of well-being with Bastyr, we notice that, when we look at research, that this impact of loneliness, of disconnect with others, as technologies, we're becoming more and more kind of technologically advanced and connected in many ways, but disconnected in others. It's and especially for the upcoming generations, they're almost losing, not, I don't want to say losing, it's a big assumption, but the social and emotional aspects of younger generations coming in are definitely not than, let's say, when you and I perhaps were growing up, or even our parents, right? So there's definitely impact there. And loneliness and these sort of things are already one of the biggest issues we have globally. And I can only imagine how that impacts, it's that mind body connection, how our mindsets, how that piece of loneliness impacts us just on so many different levels, and how important it is to have somebody to talk you through things. And and I want to talk a little bit more about that, because I know, just in terms of how we relate to food, I mean, from my experience, I'm a complete emotional eater. So I mean, whenever I feel a little bit stressed and etc., like, I reach for things, or when I'm tired, when I didn't get enough sleep, right? So it's like having somebody to work through these things is so important. But it requires a lot of vulnerability. And so so I agree in that it requires a lot of, feeling safe in that space, and not everybody is able to create that space for others as well. So I think it's, so yeah. But so I wanted to ask you, when it comes to emotions, I guess, and eating, or just as an example, emotions, and how we process food, how it affects our moods, and these sort of things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I love talking about this. It's totally my wheelhouse. And coming from, someone who's an emotional eater as well, and sometimes, falls back into those patterns, and we all do. And we're going to normalize it, because listen, no one's perfect, right? And it happens. And we're under a lot of stress right now on a global level. Everyone has their own stressors that they're dealing with, at a micro level as well in their own households and work and all that stuff. But typically, the emotions that we feel, I mean, they're there for a reason. There's information there. Just like food is information, emotions are information as well. One of the things that I've seen is not a ton of people are super great or have a really good repertoire of identifying very specific emotions that they're actually having in the moment. And they don't necessarily know how to cope with, or they don't have the coping skills to deal with an emotional response that they might be having. And so this is kind of one of those instances where, you can kind of go back in time and wonder, I wonder, when did this start, or what did this look like for you, or what kind of a situation occurred? When can you remember this first happening? To really get some insights for yourself in a non-judgmental space, just to be aware of like what actually happened. When do you remember this behavior starting, right? Because I think you and I are both really into as behaviors and habits and things like that. And so when I work with anyone, and even with myself, because I still struggle with it sometimes, I always go back to the emotion and just ask myself the very simple question of like, what is it that you're feeling right now? And I, I'll give myself this permission to say like, Elyse, or whoever, the food's there, you can have it. It's not off limits. But let's just pause for a second, for a minute. Let's just check in with ourselves. What is it that you're feeling? What are the emotions going on? See if you can identify all of those. Let's check in with your body. Where are those coming into play? And then what do you need? Because typically there's emotions that are kind of like the check engine lights that come on a car, if you think of it. They're flashing, they're kind of telling you like, hey, you need to get over to the side, check out under the hood what's going on. And that's exactly what you can do. I mean, you can check under the hood, you can ask yourself these really open-ended questions. What are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? What do you need right now? And then can you give yourself that need? Maybe you are feeling isolated or disconnected. And what do you need? Maybe you need to feel connected or loved, or I don't know, you fill in the blank, right? I mean, so then the next question would be, well, how could you give that to yourself right now? Or where could you get that from if you need to get it outside of yourself? And so there's a whole kind of cascade that you can go down and then kind of come back up, so you can support yourself in that kind of a pattern. But when we go to the root cause and we kind of go upstream and talk about like, what even got me into that space in the first place? Sometimes that might need to happen a little bit after the fact to kind of give you some time to calm down. But when you can go back upstream and say, gosh, maybe it was an argument with a coworker or with a spouse or partner or a family member, or I don't know, the news or something like that. There's a lot that could be triggering that. And so identifying, what are those triggers? What are those things for you that, maybe it could be people, places, things, so many different things that might set off that emotional eating response. And then, we talk about tiny habits, and BJ Fogg, who's actually one of our faculty members at the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, how could, we teach our students about tiny habits and building this, and, how can you prompt yourself to, when that does occur, to give yourself some time and space to ask yourself those questions, or to put in a new habit, or, do what you need to do so that it doesn't go into these destructive, patterns. And how those keep playing out. So there's definitely ways to work around that and to go upstream and start to implement new habits, for sure, around emotional eating.
And it really is about habits, because, and that's why habits are there. They're beautiful in one aspect because we don't have to think about them so much, but then they're also not great because we don't think about them so much. And so like when you're feeling stressed and you're reaching for something, like in my case, I really have to pause. And I almost always fail in this case, but I really have to put a lot of effort to pause, like literally like sticky notes, to remember that I'm not really hungry and I don't need to snack, or do you know what I mean? That I'm just under stress, and my habit is to reach for comfort food because that's what my body is craving. Or if I know I didn't get enough sleep, I know I'm craving sugar. And so, and one of the things that work for me at least is I try to, first of all, I don't keep anything, I try to avoid keeping anything like bad for my, for health in my house. I try to keep like healthy snacks, whatever it may be. I'm not always perfect, but it's that helps, like removing the access to certain things.
Totally.
It allows you to like slow down, right? That's what I found. Like it allows you to be like, oh, all right, let me think about this decision. Am I going to regret it later? How am I going to feel? So
Oh, yeah, totally. That's a great one. And I think you touched on a really good point. Like, how do you even know if you're hungry or not? And that goes into something I'm really passionate about, which is this isn't super widespread and talked about, but it's intuitive eating. There's so many diets and fads out there, and yet I think sometimes we forget that we actually do know how to eat. I mean, we're human beings. This is biologically wired within us. There's so many outside messages that come in telling us what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, where to eat, blah, 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 all this stuff.
yeah.
And I think over the years, we've just become very confused. But when we can, if you have an interest in that, of course, there is a whole body of knowledge that's very well researched as well on intuitive eating and getting back in touch with your hunger fullness signals and really understanding what hunger means to you, and taking back ownership of that. So that's a fascinating topic as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a whole other podcast on its own. I think it's super interesting. But I'm really curious. Again, that's something I've really, in the last few years, I came to kind of start noticing, but how food makes me feel. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate. And I think just that's another thing we don't do. We don't listen to our body, and our bodies are so smart. And we just don't listen to, to how we feel after certain foods, right? And so, and even like the impact on the mood and all these different things, energy levels. So talk to me a little bit about, I guess, about the connection of, or gut health in its own. I mean I'm sure that's a whole other topic on
Oh
some
yeah,
gut
that's
health.
a huge topic, and that's something we cover, as well at the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. I mean, the gut brain connection, and it's a whole interconnected, system. I don't even know where to start with this because there are so many things that I could say. I will just validate that your body is so wise, and if we can either be taught or reteach ourselves how to listen to what's happening. I mean, of course there's really good information out there, and data points as far as understanding labs, and what's going on a from a biochemical standpoint, and getting that kind of data and information, figuring out if we have SIBO or all the things, right? I mean, there's so many different things, but at the end of the day, that's kind of just a snapshot in time. And what we get to rely on, I believe, every single day is, our internal body wisdom as well. I mean, we cannot discount that either. And so being able to learn and understand your body's cues and clues, I call them, what happens when you eat a Snickers bar? Do you feel your heart starting to race? Do you feel like, yeah, you've got a lot of energy, but it's also like almost super hyper energy? Or do you feel like a total slump afterwards? And of course, with all of the different, remote monitoring systems, you can monitor a lot of these things. But if you don't either have access to that, or, you're not willing to do that or whatnot, there are still ways that you can connect internally with yourself and just really, like I had a cup of coffee this morning. I've not been doing coffee for a couple weeks now. I've just been doing decaf tea, and I had a cup of coffee and I was like dizzy and felt
You're like,
shaky.
"Ooh."
Oh my God, just one cup of coffee. And I'm like, okay, my body is talking to me. And I think it's our jobs and our responsibilities to listen.
Yeah.
And I think, from a global perspective, that's one thing I'd really love to see is just that we start listening more to ourselves, to each other.
Hmm.
Could
Yeah.
be really interesting to see what happens if we start really listening.
Really
Yeah.
listening. Yeah. And you know what's interesting is that, like you said, like our body sends so many signals. And when I talk to friends and I'm like, guys, like we're not supposed to, if you feel tired and you got like your 7 or 8 hours of sleep, like, or maybe you didn't, but you should not feel tired. That is not a default state of a human being. Like we should, do you know what I mean? So it's like something is happening. If you feel exhausted or tired, surely maybe sometimes it's the weather, it gets us down, right? Like on the East Coast, for example. But it's not normal to feel tired all the time. It's not normal to like, and it's just like, it's, I mean, or to feel a certain way, to feel bloated after certain foods. So it's like paying attention to that is so important. And the funny part is when you start to eliminate certain foods, if you start to pay attention and you feel so much better and you have energy and etc. I'm just generalizing now, obviously, but and what you realize is that after a while, when you remove certain foods, like if it's processed food or fried food, and then you kind of go into that whole foods kind of approach, or cooking at home and using natural ingredients and etc. When you do have some food that you're not used to, your body is not used to, it rejects it. Like it literally rejects it. You're like, whoa, it like kind of like what you described with coffee, because your body's like, wait a minute, we're not used to this. And you were like, oh, the body does it for so many things. It's just
Uncomfortable for you to notice, and I think that's another thing that as a society, maybe even a global society, but I think we are not comfortable getting uncomfortable. We're not uncomfortable with feeling feelings, or this is a generalization. I'm aware of that. I know some people are and can work with it, but we're not comfortable with if we ate a ton of like pizza and popcorn and chicken nuggets and beer and whatever, and then we're uncomfortable because we're extremely bloated and gassy and have heartburn and just so full. So we take Pepsid AC or whatever it is. We have to numb it out, right? There's so many different ways of numbing, which I understand we're going into a whole other conversation, but it's really numbing and dampening down, again, that body's inner wisdom and intuition to say, this is not working for me. And you got to listen, or else I'm going to, this was a little tap, but I'm going to start knocking a little bit harder.
Yeah. That's so interesting. You're so right. We just go to numbing. Like we're like, oh, my stomach hurts. We don't ask why it hurts. We just said we're gonna go and take medicine and kill this little sign that our body's like, hello, I'm smart. I'm telling you something, like this is happening. And that's why we have, when people are getting into their 40s and 50s, sometimes even earlier, they drop of heart attacks, perfectly fine, 42-year-old, etc., like with no prior issues. But that's because it's been brewing inside of you different things. And a lot of illnesses and diseases come as a result of years and years of inflammation and poor diets and just with everything that we have with environmental factors. There's a lot of other factors. Surely there's also medical issues, but a lot of it could be prevented with choosing the right kind of foods, making the right choices, creating habits and things like that. So I hope if people take away anything from these conversations, don't numb the pain and the messages your body's sending you.
Yeah. Ask why. What's going on here? What, journal a little bit. I know some people are like, oh, I don't want to journal, but sometimes getting that out onto paper can be helpful. Just asking, like, where am I feeling this in my body? And then seeking, I think one of the things that I really encourage people to do is to start owning your health. Start seeking out answers, even if it's just on, Google or YouTube or whatever. I mean, that's where a lot of people start. hopefully that will lead you to a provider, practitioner, or a way of thinking that might align with your values, your belief systems, and support you. But I know a lot of people come to the functional medicine just community and FMCA as the academy because they've traveled so many paths. They've started, at one place and kept going down their path to try to find something that does work for them. And they've been able to find answers when they get to functional medicine, which is really, it's really a godsend. So.
Absolutely. And so talk to me a little bit about you as an entrepreneur. So I know you're passionate about what you do, and I think that helps quite a bit of keeping you motivated and just kind of getting out of bed every morning and pursuing that purpose. But, what is it that you do on a daily basis that maybe helps you with your routines and your habits to also maintain a well-being? Because no matter how much you love something, it can still be stressful. It's a roller coaster on daily basis. So what do you do?
It's a really good question. I can answer that a couple ways because lately, and this is just being really vulnerable and raw and honest. And I told you at the beginning, I just got over the flu and being sick, and there's been days where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's hard to get, out of bed some days. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say every day it's like walking into sunshine and rainbows and, sparkles everywhere. Because it's not like that every day, right? I'm a normal person. I have a family, running a business. There's a lot going on. And then I have my own personal health issues as well that I'm dealing with. But what does help me, and what's been a tremendous help in my world, this is not a one size fits all. I really encourage everyone, you got to find what works for you. And it's taken me, sometimes it shifts and ebbs and it flows, but it definitely took me like over a year to get a solid routine in because I had to figure out what worked for me. I remember, I read the 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. club, excuse me, by Robin Sharma. And he talks about like, get up at 5 a.m. and start working out. Well, I tried that. I almost broke my ankle. Like, I'm not going to do that, so that's just not going to work for me. But what does work for me is, now this is an ideal situation, and this has not been happening lately just because of, just not, feeling good and making sure I'm getting enough sleep and all that. But typically I love to get up at 5 a.m., 5 or 6 a.m., and I will run a whole morning routine. So I love to meditate first thing in the morning. I then love to journal, and then I do some sort of a growth activity. So that 60 minutes, I'll break up into 20-minute sections, and I'll journal on whatever it is, my visioning for, what my vision is. Because that ebbs and flows as well. I will journal on how I want the day to unfold. And I'll reverse engineer it. I will just do a gratitude list. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. And then the growth activities could be like reading or an audiobook. Sometimes I'll couple that when the weather is nice because I'm in Chicago and it's probably similar to where you are. So like reading or listening to an audiobook while I'm walking, like a gentle nature walk in the morning or a gratitude walk that I do, or listening to a webinar or podcast, some sort of growth to like get me inspired in the morning. And then of course I'll get ready and do my daily things. I always make my bed, just, another thing to kind of feel accomplished about. So it's really starting the day kind of, I think about it with these bookends. So starting the day well and then ending the day well. And the way I end the day, typically I go to bed at 9 p.m. So kind of early, but I realize if you're going to wake up early, you have to go to bed a little bit earlier. So I'll get my daughter to sleep, and then it's a whole hour of just winding down. So that could look like, sometimes I'll give myself some free time and just do a little scrolling on Pinterest or Instagram or whatever, just mindlessly a little bit. But then we get into a routine of journaling, and I journal what went well, what did I learn that day, what kind of impact did I make on anyone that day. And then we go into some reading, just, depending on 15, 20 minutes. And then I end with a meditation and I go off to sleep. So those are my bookends. And if I can keep those two pretty consistent, I set myself up for daily success. And it's been very powerful to have those.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's spot on to just kind of start your day and end your day on certain notes. I think that's where it's at. It really kind of prepares you and also grounds you for whatever may happen, and whatever has happened, you just kind of let that go and not let it, formulate inside of you. So it's good to kind of let that go. That's a good point. That's something I'm definitely need to do better. This is the end of my day. I'm not the greatest about the end of my day. But yeah, but I also sleep very early, so I'm with you on there. It's not early. I'll go to sleep sometimes at like 8:30 p.m. 9. I mean, I'm asleep.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm out, but I also very much wake up at 4 a.m., 4:30, 5 a.m. So I love my mornings. It's I wouldn't trade it for the world. So my friends laugh at me, and so, but it is what it is.
No, mornings there's some really special moments in the morning, I think. So yeah.
Sure, I agree. So if you had a magic wand to kind of for the audience to take anything away from here, and you said, okay, if you do this, this is kind of what I want you to walk away with. What would you like to see happen?
Honestly, I think this is part of a bigger vision that I have, and it really I think it's meant to serve everyone. And it would be, what is just one tiny step that you can take towards, really taking charge or owning your health, you know, taking your health back, and just owning it. And it could just be something as simple as I don't know, I'm going to take a walk for 5 minutes every day, just starting with that. Or I'm going to meditate for 1 minute a day, or I'm just going to go to bed 20 minutes early. It doesn't need to be this huge transformation or overhaul. It just needs to start with one thing and to be consistent with that. And, for example, let me tell you something. So I've been saying for years, I want to start French again. I want to do it. Right. So I had to really sit and have a conversation with myself. I'm like, okay, do you have access to French lessons? Do you have the money? Do you have the time? Or what kind of time do you have to put into it? And then really kind of go through a little inventory of these questions for myself. And when I was able to put it all on paper, I'm like, okay, realistically, yeah, I've got the money. I have, the time. Do I have an hour every day? No, but probably like 5 or 10 minutes.
Mhm.
And so I started just being curious and researching online, and I found Duolingo. And this is not a plug for them or anything. You got to find what works for you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an app. It's like $7 a month. That's totally doable and realistic. It's on my phone. It's super convenient. I have access to it anytime I want, as long as I can remember, or it can send me a quick little notification or update to say hey, you didn't do your lesson today. I can do 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And I've been doing 51 days so far. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And so if people want to learn a little bit more about your programs, or maybe it's a health coach listening to this, maybe it's just an individual, where can they find you? Where do you hang out on social media?
Yeah. Well, if you are curious about functional medicine and health coaching, you can come over to functionalmedicanecoaching.org. And then we have a YouTube channel. We have an Instagram channel. It's at Functional Med Coach. You can connect with me personally at Elyse, ELYSE _Wagner, WAGNER. So there's a lot of ways that we can stay connected.
Awesome. And I'm going to make sure to include it all in the description. So stay tuned for that. Listen, Elyse, thank you so much for a nice conversation, for really helpful tips. And I think it's important conversation to have. And I'm glad you're one of those people that are just kind of out there and doing the work to put this information forward. So thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you again sometime.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. And I hope you were able to get something from this. I'd love to know. So if you put this on YouTube, people can put a comment below what their insight or aha moment was. Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing this, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.